welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Second Opinion, the Sports Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Dhokal.
I'm Dr. Glass.
Big D, how you doing this morning, buddy?
Good, buddy. I'm running on fumes. I think we were talking about that. These late night, early mornings. The beauties of being a concierge doc. You know, we are on the road late nights, early mornings. It's what we do, though, right? So
No,
it
it is true.
just so happens to have a couple back-to-backs for me. Usually it's spread out a little more. So, but all good.
You're just like Keenan Allen, man. Keenan Allen, somebody was asking him how many times he made the Pro Bowl. He said back to back to back to back to back. And they're like, wait a minute, how many was that? He's like, count them up, you know, back to back to back to back to back. He's like 5 times. So that's just like you.
Yes.
So you're the all-pro concierge docs.
There you go. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take that title. But yeah, no, it's kind of, there's deadlines, timelines, and you're kind of at the mercy, especially when you're working with entertainers, which I'm doing right now, working with some Dancing with the Stars stuff, and you're on their timeline. They'll rehearse at all hours of the night, because they got deadlines, they got timelines, they got things, and then they got the live shows on Tuesday. So we're just trying to get time off of studio time, so we have to make it happen when we can. So it's always kind of an interesting challenge. When you're working with teams, you got set schedules, right? With entertainers, you're on studio time, and you're on producer time, and you're on third, fourth, fifth take time, so it's never as solid as you'd like it to be.
Let's talk about that for a second. I know we have some NFL injuries to talk about, which we typically do anyways, but since we're on the topic, when you finished school, did you think you were going to be mostly concierge, or did you think you were going to like just join an associateship and work a 9 to 5?
Yeah, I never thought I'd do an associate, to be honest. I always felt like I would. It wasn't even in my thought process, to be honest. Well, let me take that back. My plan was to be an associate doc for a doc that was my home doc that I grew up with, and our plan was to me kind of take over his practice eventually. That after about 3 weeks kind of became transparent that was not going to be the plan, and that we just had too many differences in the way we practice. So we both agreed that it wasn't the right fit, and so from there on I decided that it was going to be me, myself, and I, and then from there on, 3 weeks out, I just have always been my sole guy. So looking back on it, I wish I would have done the associate route, to be honest.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because when you come out, you're super green, and I didn't have a business background. I just had skill set background, and there's so much I did not know that I did not know. So you get out of chiropractic college, and I was super green and naive, and thought that the business would take care of itself, and I would just be able to be a doctor and practice, and the money would just come in and stay in. But that's all in hindsight, right? When you're in the battle, you're not really seeing clearly all the time. So it's easier to look back and be, I wish I would have,
Yeah. What's the saying? You can see the trees when you're out of the forest, or something along those lines, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's hard to see the forest when you're in the trees, is maybe how the saying goes.
Yeah. So, but the question was about concierge, and that kind of just morphed into, I always thought the team thing would be the thing, and be part of that. But then you start getting to meet their families. You get to start meeting, the front office people, and then it just starts snowballing where people start referring out, and then it just kind of morphs into that. You're not going to pass up opportunities when somebody says, "Hey, I don't, I want you to come and work on my wife, but I don't want her to. She can't come to the facility,
right?
And I don't really want her, driving to your office. Can you come to the house?" And you're like, "Of course," So So yeah, and then it's just all word of mouth from there. Once people find out, like, hey, this guy's solid, he'll come to your place, and that's just kind of their lifestyle anyways. And so it's a no-brainer, and everybody, and then they're like, oh, well, he did that for you. So, and then it just kind of snowballs.
And for those who are listening, maybe around the country who aren't in California, it might sound weird. Why would you go do a home visit? Why wouldn't somebody just come to the office? Well, in LA and some parts of Southern California, you could be 15 miles away and it could be a 45-minute commute or an hour commute. And so for people who are busy business people, or, if you're a high level athlete, or just, you could just be a stay-at-home mom and can't get away, for all those different people, having somebody come to the house is super convenient, and you still get the same level of care just in the comfort of your home, and you save that commute time. Time is money for a lot of people, including us who drive around a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I kind of had to learn that too. With, early on, I was fortunate enough to, really early on, meet Kobe, and that whole thing kind of just morphed into some things, but not knowing, but we met personally, and then it turned into business. But I remember the first time, he actually called, through Vanessa, called my wife and said, hey, I need your husband's number, I need some more. Anyways, I made him come to the office. So
Yeah.
so looking back on it, it was like, what, but I was like, no, we got to separate personal, from, business from personal. I said, and I told him, I said, I'm going to be here to help you, so I need you to come to my place of business where I do my work.
Yeah.
And he totally respected that and understood that, and had no problem with it, because he's a business person and he understood, like, no, that's your domain, just like, I would want you to come to my domain, so super professional. He came through. I did the full workup on him for an
Mm-hmm.
hour. I remember it was later in the evening. We did schedule it a little later, so there weren't a lot of people around.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like the Pied Piper. He walked in the office, and I was at a 14,000 square foot training facility, and
Yeah.
athletes everywhere, and they see him walking through, and then the buzz, and then so we get into the treatment room. My waiting room was basically like a uh
Lobby.
it was a stretch. We had two. It was a sports medicine. We had two PT tables out
I
there,
see.
for taping and stuff, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where the trainers would come do all the stretching. Was my waiting room.
Uh-huh.
So by time he comes out of the office, that place is full. I never had a full packed
Yeah.
house in there, because people would just be one-off trainers, stretch after
No,
workouts.
everyone was stretching that day.
It was so funny. Every chair was filled, every table was filled, and then the door opens and everybody just goes back to like it was nothing big deal. Like,
Right,
it was
right.
pretty funny. I'm like, and then he
Just
left. I'm
acting
like,
casual over
yeah,
here.
it was comical. I'm like, you guys, like, I come back in, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, it was
That's
pretty funny. But no, he was super cool, and he didn't question anything. He could have been a jerk. He could have been, like, man, I'm above all this. Why are you putting me through? I put him through every single Palmer exam
yeah.
that, because I was right out of school, and so I was doing everything, and but he didn't have a problem,
I
so
can only imagine, because I've been through a few dust and
yeah.
glass comprehensive exams,
Yeah,
and they do take a while, and you
yeah.
do definitely
I'm
cover every step.
I'm thorough.
And
So
I could see it now, if we were doing it today, you're like, okay, we can not do that.
you're right.
We can focus on this.
Yeah.
But, even myself, fresh out of school, it was like, if it was a shoulder issue, I was covering front, back, side, up, under, internal, external, like everything that can be covered. We're checking.
Well, yeah, for sure. Well, you remember going through school, we had those exam sheets. So you go in the clinic, and you'd have, shoulder exam, and it'd have every
Yeah.
ortho on there, because
Yeah.
we had to learn them all, right? And in student clinic, you had to go through every ortho, and then they would sign off on it, right?
Yep.
Well, my first, like, 5 years of practice, I used those same forms, and it didn't dawn on me I didn't have to do all these anymore,
Yeah.
but I did, because and so in hindsight, that's why I got so good at ortho exam. I did every by the book, and it didn't dawn on me that the reason they had every single ortho on there was because it was a teaching thing, not a necessity thing, right?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and going back to if I was an associate doc, a doc would have told me, "What are you doing? You don't have to do that." But I was right out of school. I did school type stuff right out of, and so I got really good at diagnostics and really good because every single patient I did the full gamut of orthos.
There's probably a market for people like you and I or anybody to create, um, like almost like you just got out of school and this is like you're starting a practice for dummies, you could call it, and I did the same thing with the exam forms, the orthopedic forms. Those are all things I'd taken from school, photocopied it and used those repeatedly
Mhm.
until years later I created my own, where I was like, oh, this is what I most commonly use, so this is what I'm going to continue to do. They don't really teach you that in school. And I had the opposite experience where I got out of school and then was waiting to get licensed, taking my licensing exams, and started teaching because I moved down here to San Diego. So I took a job teaching at a college. Right when I was going to quit that job to focus on chiropractic, they offered me a job as dean. And so I was dean at this college running the medical program. And then I slowly started to build my practice up. So I was in education full time, practicing part time, and that allowed me to kind of build my patient base up. But what happened was I hired an instructor who we went to school with. I won't mention his name. He had a practice down here in San Diego, and he hired me on to help him as an associate, just part time. He said he had hurt himself and he needed some coverage. I said, sure, dude, I'll cover for you. That led to me working with him full time. Um, and I actually learned some bad habits from working there.
Mhm.
And I ended up quitting because of the way that he was practicing didn't jive with my philosophy. It was, later on down the road, it ended up he was doing some nefarious things. And so my sniff test was, I guess, accurate, where something didn't add up. It didn't feel right. It wasn't my philosophy on how to treat. We were spending 4 or 5 minutes a patient max. And so then I left there, and I didn't realize till I left there that, man, I had picked up some like bad habits on like note taking or exam technique, or don't worry about that. You don't have to do that. And I had to really re-educate myself on this is how I want to practice.
Mhm.
So I think being with the right associate can really groove in some great habits. This is how you exam. This is how you diagnose. This is, just even on how to run a business, that would have been so helpful.
Mhm.
So I had the opposite experience where I worked a couple places where I was like, well, that's not what I want to do. So it was trial and error for me too, trying to figure it out. And nobody really teaches you, you're kind of like, well, I'm going to make money and I have expenses. And so net income in, expenses out, you'll be a net positive. But shit, even doing things like taxes and payroll, I mean, that stuff was complex, a lot harder than adjusting. I'll tell you that.
100%. Yeah, I agree. The doc. So when I had the similar experience. I didn't want to get into it, but yeah, you that sniff test, and that gut check, you got to go with that. You're right on typically, and that's how the associate I was working with, or the mentor I was working with, and I just knew it wasn't the right fit. But uh, so what I did was I circled a little radius around where I wanted to practice. I did a 5 mile radius, and I just started calling, opened up the yellow books back then and just started calling every doc until one had a room for rent. Anyways, that doc was a veteran doc that I rented space out of. He did, I didn't sign up for him to mentor me, but just being a fly on the wall and us having lots of talks, he became my biggest mentor in chiropractic. And he used to call it feeding the monster. So practice was like feeding the monster. You're constantly feeding into your practice, and especially in California, with the taxes and stuff, it's terrible. So
Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
tough. And
stuff
then
you
there's
don't hear about or learn about, to your point.
yeah. And then there's a whole thing of if you take insurance or if you're a cash-based practice,
Well,
we could probably go into practice philosophy and a practice talk at another episode. But yeah, there's choices there. I chose to go all cash based, and that was slow going at first. But if you can build up that wheel and, you know, one leads to two, two leads to four, all of a sudden you have a patient base that's willing to pay. And in my experience, you have a patient base that's wanting to use their copay and they're willing to go anywhere, or you have a patient base that is paying out of pocket for services that they deem valuable. And I find that they're a more committed patient. They're more willing to do the work that you ask them to, like an athlete, you know? And so that helps my overall, I guess, results, if you want to call it that, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm happy that I went that route, but man, you and I could have definitely helped each other back in the day, you know? To start the NFL this season.
Wow.
I can't remember the last time there were so many young quarterbacks, and they're not all trash, you know?
Right.
Like sometimes you have a rookie quarterback starting because it's the third string and it was a forced situation. I'm just going to rattle off some of these. A lot of them are superstars you're familiar with. Bryce Young of the Panthers starting, CJ Stroud of the Texans starting quarterback, Anthony Richardson of the Colts starting quarterback. Those are the top three we talked about earlier in the season. Well, the Titans have Will Levis. Will Levis started playing 2 weeks ago because Ryan Tannehill went down. And I made a little asterisk, Dustin, just appreciating quarterback play. He was so poised for a young quarterback, just getting in. And we can go into depth about it more, but if I was to keep it succinct, just so poised. I saw some things out of him that I was like, that guy does not look like a rookie. So
Yeah.
I kind of made a little mental note. I'm curious to see how he progresses and how he grows. There's just something that I saw that looked special to me, different,
Yeah.
you know?
No, I agree. And I did a little research on him, just, like you're doing, like, who is this kid? Where's he from? What's going on? But in one of the quotes that are one of the articles I read, he said, about how poised he was and how he came out and did what he did. His whole thing was, I've imagined this day for so long. I've imagined this stage. I've imagined everything
Beautiful.
about this. This feels like the right place for me. So, and it reminded me of, and we'll go back to Kobe, but Kobe had a famous quote too, in the same regards about, listen, why would I be surprised when I can make that shot with the game on the line? He's all,
Mhm.
I've done it a million times in my head before. I'm
Right.
not surprised I made that shot. You guys might be surprised I made that shot, but
Sure.
I've done it already. So to his point, he's saying the same thing. To us, it's like, man, this rookie came in and threw 4 touchdowns and this many yards, and man, he's done it. And he's like, I've played this game so
Yeah.
many
I
times.
expected this
I'm
of
here.
myself.
Right. And in preseason, he his one of his idols is Tom Brady, and him and a few other of the rookie quarterbacks got to sit down for a lunch with him and talk all kinds of stories and stuff. And so he's sitting there with his quarterback idol and learning from him as well. And Tom Brady came from, we all know his story. He was not the main guy, right?
Yeah.
He was not, in college and everything. He was always overlooked, but and what he told these rookies is like, listen, I was 199th pick. The difference was with me, I outlasted everybody. So,
Yeah.
and that was interesting. So he was telling these people, like these quarterbacks, like it doesn't matter where you are right now. You just want to have longevity in this sport. Eventually you will be paid more than everybody else if you can have longevity. And so it was like the long game, not the short game for him. And I thought that was interesting.
No, I think that's 100%. I didn't know that little story about him, that anecdote. And I think
Mhm.
that's awesome that, I mean, look, if you're an NFL quarterback, you make it to the league, obviously you expect high execution from yourself and, you expect to be successful, but not everybody is, and so, yeah, there was just, I can't put my finger on it. There's something intangible, either just how calm he was while the pocket was collapsing. I saw him step up in the pocket a couple times. I saw him look off his first read and hit his second read. On one play, he hit his third read, which those are little nuances that maybe is a little nerdy, but I was like, man, that he's going to be something
special. Yeah.
I don't think he loses his job to Ryan Tannehill. I think if he wins another game, I think maybe Tannehill sits, I'm not sure.
Well, it's hard to argue with those numbers, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's coaches sitting down and be like, okay, listen, I know we have our guy here, but look at what he's doing, and if he can reproduce that and stay, poised, and and he ended up helping them win a crucial game. They needed that game and they
Yeah.
won it. I think
No,
it
it
was
was big.
28-23 or something.
Yeah, he made the difference. Yeah. That's awesome. You get your first win. Your team had a rookie quarterback start this year, Aiden O'Connell, the Raiders. The Browns had a rookie quarterback, Dorian Thompson Robinson. I didn't get to catch him play, unfortunately, but the Browns had him starting while Deshaun Watson was out. Clayton Tune, Cardinals QB. Jaron Hall, the Vikings QB. Tommy DeVito, the Giants QB. Tyson Bagent, the Bears QB. And Tyson's interesting. I don't know if you saw. Do you know who Tyson's dad is by chance, Dustin?
No.
Okay, Tyson Bag. How do you pronounce his name? Bagent. I'm not sure. If I'm butchering it, my apologies. For a guy who has a name like Paulin, I should learn how to pronounce everyone's name.
I was gonna say that, I don't even try,
Right.
because I got a pretty simple glass. That's easy, right? So I leave all those names up to you, because at least you have a little more experience.
Let me tell you a little story about Tyson Bagent. He is the Bears quarterback, and what is awesome about him is his dad is a 28-time arm wrestling champion.
Oh man. So yeah.
So your dad's an arm wrestling champion. You have a little bit of swag. Your dad's probably, he's that guy, right? And so he was at the game pregame, and one of these little ESPN announcers or something was like, "I hear you're an arm wrestling champion." He's like, "I am. I feel sorry for you." So they had this arm wrestling thing, and it was just really funny the way he was like talking to this announcer. He's like, "Now you do what you do and I do what I do. So what's going to happen here now is you're going to put your hand and you're going to try to get my hand to here. What's going to happen is this hand's not going to move. And then your hand is going to go down like this. And you're going to feel about this tall, but don't worry about it. I'm the champion." He was just like really kind of making fun, and boom, he put him down, So it was kind of funny to see his dad. He was really like taking the show on, he he was in his element, he took the mic and was talking, and it was pretty cool.
As soon as you said that, I did see that highlight. I didn't even put two together when you said the name, but I did see that clip, and I think that was last week or so. And he really, like you said, it was almost WWE for arm wrestling. He was not a stranger to entertainment. That's
right.
For sure. He knew how to work.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
He was entertaining for sure. He was proud of his son, but he was out there. He's like, "Oh, this is my time.
He took the show for sure." That's what I thought too. I'm like, man, look at this dad. This is awesome.
No, it was super cool to see. It was kind of neat. Let's see who. There's one more person I wanted to bring up. So those are the 10 rookie quarterbacks. Give me just 1 second. Who else was I wanted to bring up? Oh, I know who it was, bro. I want to talk about this guy for a second. Josh Dobbs was the quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. Kirk Cousins went down this week, which we're going to talk about, with his Achilles. So Kirk Cousins ruptured his Achilles, out for the season. And that happened last week. The Vikings were struggling. The trade deadline was approaching, and they trade for Josh Dobbs. Josh was not supposed to play this week for the Vikings. And I think their regularly scheduled backup got hurt. In fact, he did. I think he got a concussion, if I remember correctly. And so Josh Dobbs, who just joined the team on Wednesday, Dustin, wasn't supposed to play. He's like still learning the playbook, right? He gets thrown into the game. Long story short, he wins the game. They win the game. He leads the team and they win the game. And what's amazing is in this post-game press conference, for those who don't play quarterback or aren't, you know, familiar, if you leave a team and you go to another team, it's like learning a whole different language.
Right.
You know, take Justin Herbert, for example. He's had 2 coaches and 3 offensive coordinators. And so sometimes people, you know, will harp on Herbert and say, man, his numbers or this or that. And I got to remind people, when you have a new offensive coordinator, you're learning a whole new language. The way you call plays, everyone's having to learn something new. A veteran like Keenan Allen, he's had to learn many offensive, you know, playbooks and terminologies. And so what was impressive to me about Dobbs, he went to a new team and he used the example in his post game saying, imagine you're in AP Spanish and you're studying all year and you're ready to take a final. And then the Wednesday before your final on Sunday, they say, nope, instead of AP Spanish, you're now taking AP French. And he's like, that's what it felt like. And he's like, so when they were calling the plays, they were calling them in French, and I had somebody that was translating them into Spanish for me, so I understood it in my way, even though they have their way. So he was really just doing his best. He said he didn't know people's names on the team yet. He said, all that's for next week. This week it was to win. And so he was out there just sandlotting it. And
that's what I was thinking when you were saying that story.
And the last thing I heard about him, read about him, which then I was like, okay, that makes sense. He's a 4.0 aeronautical engineer or something along those lines, you know? And so then I was like, well, obviously he processed that information quickly. He was able to, even just his analogy, where he's like, imagine taking AP Spanish and you got to take an AP French final. He just showed me a little something. So I was really impressed with that outing and that success that he had, where he was able to just step right in. He wasn't even supposed to play. The backup was supposed to play. And then it was like, well, now you're in. And he didn't just play well, Dustin. I mean, he performed. I mean, he put up fantasy numbers.
Good for him, man. Well, yeah, that's got to give your team and coaches confidence, right? If you could do it under that circumstance, wait till you get comfortable with, you know, everything. That's pretty cool.
I think he's only going to get better. So that was a pretty interesting story this week. So a lot of quarterback news, a lot of rookie quarterbacks. I thought Josh Dobbs did amazing. The Texans quarterback CJ Stroud had some amazing stats as well. I don't know if you caught some of his highlights or kind of heard about the exceptional game that he had.
I didn't, but I think he was him and another rookie quarterback were I wish I wrote it down, but both setting records as rookies. I think Stroud had, I forget what rookie, so I think a yardage or something in the first, you know, his first 5 games or whatever, how many weeks, you know, not 5, I forget what it was, but yeah, he's doing exceptionally well.
I jotted down a few little bullet points that I'll share with you. He had a 147.8 passer rating, which is the highest single game passer rating by a rookie quarterback in NFL history.
Right. Yeah.
If you make the NFL and you set one record in the NFL, it's pretty amazing. He also had 470 passing yards, which is the most passing yards by a rookie in a game, again, in NFL history. He became the youngest player ever with at least 450 passing yards in a game. And then he became just the 6th player only in NFL history to record at least 450 passing yards and 5 touchdown passes with no interceptions. So 5 TDs, 450 yards, no picks. That is a day. That is a day.
That's the stat I was reading, and I knew I got 5 from somewhere. It was the 5 TD. So I'm glad you finished that sentence, because I'm like, I remember reading every line. Where'd that 5 come from? So thank you for reading that. Yeah, I read that same stat. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, for
him.
A young Texans team that isn't necessarily balling out and crushing it, for them to have a good game, a breakout game. And I think for the rest of the team to see, hey, we might have somebody here who can lead our team in the future. That's encouraging, even if you're having a bad season.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. I did see one injury that I hadn't seen, that we don't see very frequently, and it was Dallas Goedert, the tight end of the Eagles.
Yeah.
He caught a reception, Dustin, where he caught the ball. He was trying to kind of straight arm somebody as he was like running away. The guy kind of had his arm, And as he fell back, his right arm, I believe it was extended, and the player like landed on him on the outstretched arm. So it almost looked like he kind of hyperextended his elbow. And when he got up, he was kind of holding his arm. He was about to get up, and then he like took a knee, and then he went on his back. I'm like, oh man, maybe he sprained his shoulder. I was thinking like AC joint or maybe something with the elbow hyperextended. And he ended up fracturing his forearm from that impact. It seemed like it was just trauma based, just the impact of the body on the arm. And of course, it doesn't move that way. So
Yeah.
I didn't get specifics as to whether it was the radius, the ulna, the humerus, what was fractured, but he has a fracture in there. And he's going to be out a few weeks. What's your, if he's your client, what do you do to accelerate that, if anything? You just put him on the shelf? What's your take on that?
No, I was trying to, I didn't see the mechanism of that. But what you're describing, that's kind of weird. I would think it would be more towards the, proximal end of the forearm near the elbow,
Mm-hmm.
with that extended. Because normally a forearm fracture is like you take a blow to it, like in a car accident or something, or where you get a blow to that forearm and fracture that in the middle of the long bone. But regardless, uh so for me, since we use PMF, we both use Beamer. I use LS Pro too. Those are two
Mm-hmm.
companies I use with pulse electromagnetic field. That's FDA approved for bone healing, to help with the microcirculation and what I like about that is that the circulation after treatment lasts up to 12 hours. So
Correct.
when they go home, they're still getting that microcirculation, feeding those, because like I tell them, you got to remind them that bone is living tissue.
Yep.
So and it has a blood supply. So anything we can do, because the typical game plan is you just gotta, it's a waiting game. You got to go
Right.
home, rest, let it heal. You got 6 to 8 weeks to let that bone mend. Well, if we can start feeding it with more nutrients, we're going to accelerate that. Typically, I see, and even the orthos comment when we do pre and post X-rays, you're like, man, and I hear it all the time from the orthos. You're about 2 weeks ahead of schedule,
Yep.
and then that's unsolicited from the orthos. Many times the orthos, especially on my non-pro, guys, they don't even know we're doing PMF
Yeah.
or laser or whatever. So they're just seeing the patient for a follow-up in 4 weeks or whatever, and they're telling the patient, man, I can't believe how fast you're healing. Patient comes back to me, they're excited. They're like, I didn't tell them what we're doing, but I'm like, man, I hear it all the time, 2 weeks
Yeah.
ahead of schedule. So that's a no-brainer for me. And then luckily I have hyperbaric, so that's another. I love those two modalities because they're passive modalities. They don't, no contraction, no nothing. And patients, when they're told just to relax, sometimes patients are nervous about doing anything that's going to put motion into it, thinking, even though we know some things like the ARB wave and so like ultrasound, there's been research to show that it can help stimulate the bone too. But some patients come in with
They're
just
just apprehensive.
yeah, because they've heard from people like, oh no, you can't do that, and they're uneducated, right? So I like having the passive modalities and the PMF and the hyperbarics where we can just say, hey, you don't have to do anything, let the body heal itself, but we're going to accelerate that through these modalities. And so for me, that's what I'm doing. And then I'm talking to them about nutrition too, and how to from inside out feed the bone too. So
Yeah. That was the one thing that you didn't mention that I was going to say is just as important as the external things that you're doing, passive or not, is, how you're feeding your body. That matters with tissue repair. It matters with healing time. So if you're feeding yourself, sugar and junk, that's not going to cut it. You need to give your body the nutrients, the hydration, so it can repair itself. The PEMF thing is interesting because there's a few players that I know who have osseous issues, fractures that are healing, and they are not using PEMF right now. And it's kind of a no-brainer to me, and I've had the same situation. I had a patient who got in a vicious motorcycle accident, fractured both legs, had surgery, really, really aggressive. And long story short, we decided to do PEMF on his really bad leg where he had surgery and he had multiple fractures. We didn't do it on his right leg where he just had 2 small fractures. And Dustin, when I tell you every single time he came in, he was telling me, man, my doctor cannot believe how quickly I am healing. He can't believe how quickly I'm getting better. I think his estimate was like 6 months or 7 months for him to be able to like start to like get back into normal things. And at about the 3.5 month mark, he was weight bearing, his fracture had healed. And we were kind of running a little experiment. Hey, we're going to do it on your left leg and not your right leg, and let's see what it does. And at about the 2 month mark, he's like, forget this experiment, doc. Like hit me on the other leg too. Like I'm trying to get back, and it makes me scratch my head sometimes when I see NFL teams with a player with a, fractured finger or a fractured toe or a this or that. And it's been 6 weeks and it's still not healed. And I'm like, I know they're not using everything that they could use. Even something simple like a hyperbaric chamber. Not all NFL teams have that. Not all NBA teams or NHL teams have that modality. I don't know if it's because it's a little bit harder to learn how to use, or if it's a cost thing, or if it's a lack of knowledge. But sometimes it's frustrating because those things work, and it's like, man, I don't want to have the philosophy of I could get that guy back on the field quicker. But sometimes you really do feel like, man, if they were using X, Y, or Z, this would really help them. And to, get in the ear of somebody to get them to start to use something or maybe go against what the team is saying can be a challenge as well. You really have to have the players that trust me. They'd be like, doc, you think I need to use this? I'm going to use it. But if it's somebody new, like I'm thinking of somebody I haven't worked on who has a fracture, I don't have a relationship with them. If I went to that person and said, hey, I have this thing that's going to help accelerate it, I could see why they might approach you with a little skepticism. Like, well, why wouldn't the team have said that? Who are you to tell me that this is going to help me, And so you get a little bit of guarding. But, if you have previous success with, say, his teammates, now you have a little bit of trust, right? So have you had that happen before where you've seen somebody that you're like, man, I feel like the hyperbaric or the PEMF or whatever the modality is could help them, but you just didn't have access to that client or that player?
Oh, for sure. Right. Because we watch the news and we follow the injury reports. I do for all the different sports and see what comes across. And especially when like if with local teams or whatever, and you're seeing, it's making big news. This athlete's out for this particular issue, and because you've had experience helping that, and you just want to call them up or and say,
Yeah.
listen, I know what they're doing over there, but but it's a fine line, right? You can't be stepping on toes. You can't be, but usually I've only done it a couple times where I either knew the PR person or especially with entertainers or whatever.
Mhm.
I think in the last couple of years, I've only done it twice when there's been some big name people. And I said, listen, with what they've got going on, it's sad to see that it's taking so long. This is what can help them. Just tell their people, and if they need my help, I have that. But
Yeah.
if not, let me help you find somebody, if you don't want to use me. And
That's a great approach.
yeah.
I've done that as well, where I've reached out and said, hey, I have, for instance, the Beamer. I think this could help you. If you don't want me to come down, or if you want to find somebody, I can help you find somebody that's close to you. I think that approach seems a lot less
And
salesman-y,
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, hey, it's just for your best interest, So
Yeah.
if it's not me, find somebody else.
Yeah, that's the approach I take too. And that's why I love having you down in San Diego, because, especially with my athletes down there and stuff or down, I'll pimp you out all the time and be like that. And I feel good about that because,
Right.
I don't, as long as they're getting help, I feel like I've still done my job. Right.
Sure.
And like in the same approach you come, it's like, hey, if it's not me, let me help you find somebody. And, and so a lot of times then they get the message. They're like, okay, you're not trying to get my business, and then the trust improves there.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. It's an interesting position to be in. I feel very privileged to have had experience with a lot of different modalities that maybe aren't regularly used. And I say that to my general population base that comes into the office often, where I'm like, man, This is not something that like every office has, and I think this is going to help you. And I approach that when they say, well, I've never seen this before, or how come everybody doesn't have this? It's like, well, my specialty happens to be working with high level athletes and preventing injuries. And so, we use things that maybe the typical chiropractic office wouldn't use, perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's a great opportunity to educate them about different modalities that can be helpful for that specific situation. So yeah, to your point about whether it's me helping them or you helping them or somebody else, just getting that person in contact with the right person, I feel like I've done my job as well. That was well put by you.
Yeah. Well, for sure. And like real quick to that point where you're saying like people ask that question a lot, like, why haven't I seen that?
Yeah,
I always throw it back. I said, do you ever wonder, how these athletes get back so much faster than the average person? And
sure.
they're like, yeah, because they see it in the news, like, oh man, I had an ACL. They had an ACL. Why'd they get back and they're playing and doing it all? And I'm still a year out working on it, or 2 years out, not 100%. I said, well, if you recognize that, what do you think they're doing in there? What do you think they have access to? They have access to these type of tools. You don't see it in general, practices, because it's normally just in a professional setting. With what we do, we're fortunate to have those kind of things, so
Yeah. Yeah. Science is really changing, sports med is changing. There's things every few years that pop up. And I think you and I do a good job of vetting those things, because every year there's something new with a new claim of this is the latest and the greatest, and not everything is effective.
right.
Not everything is as they claim to be. As we wrap up today, Dustin, I want to mention a couple different injuries just in passing because they were significant for those teams. The Steelers lost their linebacker Cole Holcomb. He had a bad injury. He was carted off. Ended up being a knee injury, and he's out for the year, unfortunately. So a big blow for the Steelers with
Yeah,
that.
that was such a big hit that they didn't even show it. They didn't even replay it on TV. It was such a gruesome type hit. I watched it a couple times. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah, I'm glad that they do that now,
Yeah.
because when I was younger, I would be like, let me see it again. Let me see it again. I wanted to watch it. But now I recognize, man, they might have family that's watching the game at home. They might have family that's in the stands. They have friends, and that's concerning. I've watched a friend get hurt on the field before, and you're not there, and man, you don't know what's happening. And so for them to just be cognizant of that and not show something that is gruesome, that could be disturbing to friends or family, I think that's always a you know, good way to kind of err on the side of caution
Yeah,
for the
good call.
networks. Daniel Jones, we talked about, the quarterback of the Giants. He had a neck issue. He'd been out several weeks with a neck problem. I was going to bring up, different neck issues, whether it's disc compression or whiplash. He tore his right ACL, Dustin, so he's out for the year. So
Yeah, if you look up his history with his injuries over the last since I think 2018, 19, 20, 20, he has a lot of lower body injuries, a lot of ankle injuries that
yeah,
take him out of the game. He's got multiple ankles, multiple hamstring. He's just he's just, and now he's got multiple neck things. But if he's not, then that's a good point to, rehab and prehab. If you're not taking care of it on a regular and you're just taking care of it to get rid of the pain, but you're not doing follow-up routine care, hopefully he is, but you would hope, but if not, if there's no other better case than taking care of your body after a single injury for your future self, this would be a case after reading his history.
yeah,
He's just, susceptible.
yeah. I mean, you hate to have that tag, but it's sometimes people say you're injury prone, and he seems to kind of have that tag. Unfortunately,
Definitely this year. Yeah.
it'd be curious to see if the Giants move on from him or what they do if they draft a quarterback. I hate it when people lose their jobs due to injury. If you're
Yeah.
somebody else more talented comes up, you can kind of swallow that. But as an athlete, if you have to take a seat because you're injured and you're not out there doing your best, that's tough. One other injury I wanted to bring up, Cam Akers. He tore his left Achilles this last week. He had torn his right Achilles in 2021. So 2 years later, left Achilles. For a running back, that's terrible. Um, you know, it's just unfortunate how it happened. There's big injuries in football, a couple ACLs this week, couple Achilles. It's unfortunate,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Rams are having a tough go at it this year as well
Yeah.
with the injuries. I'll have to look up in the next couple of weeks what team has had the most injuries this year. But there's two or three that have had just an exceptional amount of excessive, I should say, not exceptional, excessive amount of injuries. So I'll look that up and we'll talk about those stats later on.
Sounds good.
I have one highlight I want to bring up, but anything that's on your mind before we sign off for today? Any last thoughts?
No, I do got to get going, but well, you mentioned running backs. Did you see that running back that kicked that field goal?
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Break it down.
Yeah. Oh man, what's his name? It was pretty. I
Oh
had it.
shoot, was it on the Texans?
I think it was. He kicked a 28-yard field goal. I took a
Yes,
picture of it. I got his name right here.
it was
But
on the Texans. I think I saw the Texans coach crack a smile. He was
yeah,
very
yeah. I'm gonna butcher his last name, but it's Dare Ogunda Bowali, something
yes.
like that. But yeah, the Texans. Yeah, it was a 20. What was it? 29-yard field goal. But anyways, yeah. So I guess their kicker went down and they showed him pregame warming up and trying to make it. But yeah, he made that. He nailed it. So
Impressive,
that's so
impressive.
fun. Talk about a
That's
good highlight.
impressive.
Yeah. I'm sure that I'd love to see the stat, but I can't imagine there's been too many other running backs that have come in and done that.
Hey man, you get a game ball when you catch a touchdown, or you can
Yeah.
keep the game ball. But if I was a running back and I kicked a field goal, I'd want
Yeah.
that. I'd want that ball.
For sure. Well, yeah, for sure. And well, he'll have that story the rest of his life too, right? He'll be a 80-year-old old man and they'll still be talking about,
Yeah,
when grandpapa,
kick the field
kicked that
goal.
field goal. And but yeah, you would expect like a receiver type or a DB type to step in there, a tall, lanky guy, but not a running back. So
Yeah,
anyways, good for him. And it was fun, it was like everybody was in junior high again, getting all excited, for him.
yeah, dude, it's
So
awesome. It's
yeah.
amazing. Well, before we go, I wanted to give some credit and some congratulations to my good friend Keenan Allen. He last night crossed the 10,000 yard threshold for
Yeah.
receiving yards, which, if you're with a team long enough to catch enough balls to cover 10,000 yards, that's impressive. Not many receivers hit that feat. He's done it all with one team. Props off to Keenan, man. He came out of college in the 3rd round. I think he should have been a 1st-round draft pick. Was, coming off a knee injury, so he fell in the draft a little bit. And I think early on in his career, he was kind of tagged as maybe injury prone. Just some unfortunate things. Broke a collarbone, had a lacerated kidney, like really unfortunate and injuries you can't prevent. That's not like you didn't train hard enough. Those are just freak injuries.
Yeah.
And then he tore his ACL and got comeback player of the year in 2017 and has been healthy ever since. And I'm really proud of the work he put in. What was cool yesterday on the catch that put him over 10,000 yards, the ball was overthrown. He stretched out, made like a one-handed grab, pulled it in, turned his body, like spun in the air, landed, got the reception. It was just such a,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a slant pass that you catch. It
Yeah.
was a highlight reel catch
It
to
was
put him over 10,000 yards. And
Keenan-esque, right? Yeah.
Keenan-esque, yeah.
Yeah.
The
No. Bro,
he did some
10,000 yards. Like I'm stoked when I get 10,000 steps in on a day, right? Like so,
right,
that's my little victories, like
right.
10, that's amazing. Well, and to your point, like you said, okay, so how many number one drafts, how many are 1st-round draft people? How many skate through pretty no injuries, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and you and I are along the same, like that everything he's gone through has given his drive to do what he's doing, right?
Yes.
So instead of be like, why, oh, well, what was me type thing, it's like, no, because of that, I am doing what I'm doing,
Yes.
despite all that,
And
so
that's what I
good for
love
him.
too. I think if you're the casual fan, you probably just think, well, he's been doing Keenan things since he was a rookie. But
Yeah, he's
having
just
seen
blessed.
him from San Diego days when he played at Qualcomm as a rookie in 2013, to playing in a soccer stadium at StubHub to now playing in SoFi in LA. For the first 8 years of his career, I think I saw every single game home and away. For 10 years, I traveled with the Chargers to every single game, and I got to witness him just grow as a player, but also witness him overcome a lot. And that's where my respect comes in, because he's met a lot of physical challenges, and even life challenges, and overcome those and still had success. And I take my hat off to anybody who continues to try to get better despite challenges and setbacks. That's character. And I love to hang around people that have that drive. You're one of them, and he is as well. And so, I just want to say congratulations to him.
Yep.
It was well earned, not given, definitely earned. And it was a nice moment to see him get that catch. And I think his mom was at the game too, and he gave the ball to his mom, and she had a big smile. It was just nice to see it. It warmed my heart. It was nice.
Good for him.
Yeah, it was awesome. So, well, we have another NFL week coming up. I think we have week 10 next week, so we're in double digits. Looking forward to the conversation next week. And any last thoughts before we sign off, Dustin?
No, I do got to go though. We pushed the envelope a little, so let's do a quick hard sign out, and we'll be good to go.
Well, I'll catch up with you soon later on this week, D. To our listeners, thank you. Spread the word. If you enjoyed today's episode, tell a friend. This is the Second Opinion Sports Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Dhokal.
I'm Dr. Glass.
And we'll be back here doing it again in a few days. We look forward to it. We enjoy what we do, and we appreciate you guys listening. Dustin, have a good rest of the week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, buddy. Have a good one.
All right, my brother. We'll see you soon.
Talk to you soon.